Hello and welcome to this channel. My name is Dick van Oeveren and today I will be demonstrating how to configure a Comware 5 or Comware 7 device to do MAC authentication and 802.1x against a ClearPass server. In the diagram you will see the setup that I've created. I've got a Comware 5 and a Comware 7 device here on a client connected to Gigabit Ethernet port 1/0/1. I've got an uplink port 1/0/24 going to a router, and that router connects to a services VLAN where I have my ClearPass server and my Active Directory DHCP and DNS services. And I have two VLANs configured for this setup, one for .1x, which is VLAN 10, and one for MAC authentication, which is VLAN 11. And what I'm going to show you is I'm going to show you how to push the right VLAN and a right ACL to the switch upon successful authentication. The good thing about Comware 5 and Comware 7 is that the operating systems are very similar in terms of configuration. And that's also what I'm going to show you. So I've got on my left telnet session, I've got a Comware 5 switch, and on my right telnet session I've got a Comware 7 switch. So what we have to do is, in terms of configuration, we have to create a radius scheme first, and you can see here that I am using a primary authentication server, which is the ClearPass server, for authentication and assigning a secret key. And I'm using a primary accounting server, which is also the ClearPass server, and also with a secret key. Username forward without domain. That means that for 802.1x authentication, I don't have to enter a domain name. I just have to enter the username, and I am enabling accounting. And if you compare both configs, Comware 5 and Comware 7, so the config is exactly the same. The second step in the configuration is configuring the domain. And again, the configuration differences between Comware 5 and Comware 7 are minimal. The only relevant commands that you need to configure for both Comware 5 and Comware 7 are the authentication, authorization, and accounting settings. So for LAN access, we're setting this to the radius scheme access security that we've just created, and we have a fallback to the local authentication. So if your radius scheme setup would fail, so if your radius server would not be available, the authentication scheme falls back to the local authentication. And then before going into the interface configuration, we have to enable some stuff globally. So what we're doing here is we are setting the default domain for access security, which is the domain that is enforcing the 802.1x and MAC authentication. I'm enabling port security. Port security is a group of security features that allows you to do port security, MAC authentication, and 802.1x at the same time. And we are setting the .1x authentication method to EAP. And it's actually exactly the same commands that you use on Comware 7. So you set the .1x authentication method and you enable port security. There's another command that we use here on Comware 7 that we don't have to use on Comware 5, which is port security MAC move permit, which allows you to move clients to a different port, and then it will allow you to do the MAC move. Okay, and then let's go into the interface configuration for Comware 5 and 7. You can see that, again, the configuration is very similar. For dynamic VLAN assignment and ACL assignment, what we have to do is we have to set the port link type to hybrid, and we have to enable MAC VLAN. The MAC VLAN feature is used to map the MAC addresses to the right VLAN, and because we're doing dynamic VLAN assignments through radius, we have to enable the MAC VLAN feature on that port. The other thing is we've got STP edge port enabled, so that allows you for the edge port to go directly into forwarding mode. I'm setting the max users for MAC authentication to 10, so I can have a maximum of 10 MAC addresses authenticated to this port. And the port security port mode setting here is set to user login secure or MAC extended, which means that I'm trying a user login secure first. So I'm trying to do a .1x first with port security. So I'm securing the MAC address on that port. If my client does not support 802.1x, I'm using MAC Authentication. Another very important command that we have to set is the .1x handshake. Typically a Windows client does not support the handshake function. So what happens with the .x1 handshake is that the switch at regular intervals checks whether the client is still online, and the client should respond to that handshake. Now, Windows client does not support the handshake function, so that means that the switch does not get a response back and will assume that the client is not online. So what will happen then is that after a specific time out, the port will go into blocking mode again. And that's something that we don't want because the user is already authenticated. And then there's another command here, which is the multicast trigger command. We don't really need that function. So multicast trigger is basically a function that allows you to trigger a 802.1x authentication if the client does not initiate the EAPOL. So if the client doesn't send an initial EAPOL request, but it sends out a multicast rather than an EAPOL, then the 802.1x authentication is triggered as well. Okay, so let's check out the ClearPass configuration. Actually, it's pretty straightforward. So what we're going to do is we're going to check out the profiles first. We have to create two profiles, one for 802.1x and one for MAC Authentication. And let me show you the 802.1x first. And actually what we're going to do is we are going to assign a VLAN here with the Tunnel Private Group ID VSA, and we are going to assign an ACL number 3000. So what you can see here for the VLAN assignment, what we can do is we can either assign a VLAN number or a VLAN name. So in this example, I'm actually assigning a VLAN name. And the way to configure this is to actually give the VLAN that you configure on the switch a name. And let me quickly show you that on the switch. So if I go to VLAN 10, for example, which will be my corporate VLAN, do display this, you can see that my name is corp. And actually you can see that for VLAN 11 as well. So if I go back to my ClearPass server, go back to the MAC Auth profile, you can see that I'm assigning a Tunnel Private Group ID with the name MAC Auth. So that will be VLAN 11. And also what you can see here, my filter ID is 3001. So that's an ACL that I've created. And let me show you the ACL on the switch. So the ACLs on Comware 5 and Comware 7 are again exactly the same. So if I do display ACL 3001, you can see that I'm setting some rules here. I'm allowing DHCP, I'm allowing DNS, I am blocking the services VLAN, and I'm permitting IP. So that and this would be ACL 3001, which is for the MAC authentication. For the corporate access, I'm basically allowing all traffic. So I'm setting a rule 0 permit IP. So that's allowing all traffic. Okay, so back to the ClearPass config. So that's your profiles. And for the policies, I'm creating two policies here. And what I can do with the policies, obviously, I can assign all types of policy rules here. For MAC authentication, I'm keeping it simple. I'm just doing a user authenticated, and I am so if the user is authenticated, I'm just pushing the MAC auth Comware profile. But you can do some profiling here as well, but that's beyond the scope of of this demonstration. So for 802.1x Comware, what I'm doing here is I'm assigning a role. So what I'm doing for the 802.1x, I have created a role mapping that maps into an Active Directory. And if the authenticated user is a member of a specific group, I can authenticate against that, and I am assigning the 802.1x Comware profile. So that's your policy. And then for the services, I have two services, one for MAC Auth and one for 802.1x. Let me show you the 802.1x first. A service. So what I'm doing here is a PEEP or TLS authentication method with my authentication source being an Active Directory, and my authorization resource or source is also an Active Directory. I am mapping against the AD role mapping, and I am enforcing the 802.1x Comware policy that I've created here. For the MAC authentication, it's a little bit slightly different. So for the service, that's all straightforward. And for the authentication, rather than doing a MAC authentication, I'm doing an allow all MAC auth. So that's basically automatically authenticating the end device. And the other thing is I am I'm enabling the used cache results. So that means that once a MAC address is authenticated, that result is cached. So if that client would reconnect again, it will automatically authenticate. And I'm using the enforcement policy MAC Auth Comware here. And that's basically the configuration. Let's put it to the test. So what I'll do now is I'm connecting a 802.1x client to port 1 of the Comware 5 switch, and I will be authenticating that user. And let me just enter the information. You won't see it on the screen because it's a different laptop. And authenticating, and I'm authenticated. What you can see on the Comware 5 screen is you can see some successful logins here, being assigned to VLAN 10. So what I can do is I can show you some commands on the Comware switch. So if I do display.1x interface gig 101, you can see that I have a user online. Link is up. I've got one authenticated user here with that MAC address, and there's another command that I can use, display.1x session interface gig 1/0/1, and again you can see the authenticated user here. And let's check out the access tracker on ClearPass. What I can see here in the access tracker for the Comware 5 is I've got an accept, and let me check the output, what is sent to the switch. You can see that the filter ID 3000 is sent, and the tunnel private group ID corp, which is VLAN 10. So let's do the same test on a Comware 7 device. Now before connecting a client to gig Ethernet 1/0/1, what I can do is I can do some debugging. And actually I can do that also on Comware 5, but let me just show you this on Comware 7. I'm setting the terminal monitor and term debug, and I'm going to debug radius all, and I'm going to debug .1x and all. Okay, now let me just connect a client to the switch. What you'll see on the CLI, you'll probably see a lot of stuff coming once I have entered the credentials. There you go. There's a lot of stuff coming onto the CLI. You can actually also see that the authentication is successful. So let me just scroll up a little bit so you can see the information here. Okay, so let me just disable the debug. We can do this with the Control O quick key. And let's go and check out the configuration and the connection. So display.1x interface gig 101. So you can see that the port is online. Now, here is a slight difference between Comware 7 and Comware 5. So with Comware 5, I'm using the display.1x session command. For Comware 7, I'm not using the session command, but the connection command. So that's slightly different. Gig 1/0/1. And what you can see here also is you can see some more information here. I've assigned VLAN 10 and my ACL ID is 3000. And okay, so then going back to the access tracker. So you can see I've got an accept and my output is 3000. So that's also working. And let's check out MAC Authentication. Connecting a non-802.1x client to the switch. I'm starting with Comware 7. And so let's see what's happening here. The local area connection is identifying, and I should be getting a MAC Authentication here. You can see it on the CLI here that my user got online successfully. And just let me display MAC Authentication connection interface gig 1/0/1, and you can see that my authentication is successful. My authorization VLAN is VLAN 11, which is the MAC Auth VLAN, and my authorization ACL is 3001. And let me just do another one. MAC Authentication interface gig 1/0/1. I have one online MAC user and my MAC address here, and the state is authenticated. And let's do a test on Comware 5 as well. I'm connecting the client to port 1 of the Comware 5 device. What I also did is I enabled some debugging, as you could see on the switch, and you can see a lot of stuff coming here from the debugging. Okay, so what I can do is I can do Control O again just to disable the debugging, and let me show you the status. Display MAC Authentication and interface gig 1/0/1, and I have a successful authentication here. Okay, so let's check out the access tracker. I should have two radius MAC authentications here. The one that I just did for Comware 7 is this one, and this is the one for Comware 5. They're actually exactly the same. So let me just take the Comware 7 one. I get an accept here, and let me show you the output here. I'm pushing ACL 3001, and I am pushing the MAC Auth VLAN here. And then a final check, because obviously I want to know whether my client has ended up in the right VLAN. So what I can do is on the Comware device, I can do display VLAN 11 in this case, because I'm doing MAC authentication, which pushes VLAN 11. And you can see here that gig Ethernet 1/0/1 is an untagged member of VLAN 11, which proves that the client is operating in VLAN 11. And this concludes this demonstration of MAC Authentication and 802.1x on Comware devices, Comware 5, Comware 7 in combination with ClearPass. I hope you liked the video. If you did, you just click the like button, and thanks for watching, and hope to see and hear you soon. Bye bye.